Well guys, now that I've got to run a couple of different disc mulchers, I've decided the Loftness is probably the best thing to start with to create the best disc mulcher that you can get. I recently got to try out this Eco from AFE, and it's really, in my opinion, not even in the same ballpark as the Loftness. Well, as you can see in the background, I've got plenty of trees to cut. We recently switched the mulching skid steer to a Cat 299. We had some issues with the Loftness basically exploding like a hand grenade with the ASV RT135. So the differences there are going to be the Cat runs 4,000 psi, 40 gallons a minute, 110 horsepower. ASV RT135 runs 4,000 psi, but 50 gallons a minute and 132 horsepower. One morning I went out, it was 22 degrees. I let the skid steer warm up, hopped in. Maybe I let it warm up too long without trying to cut a tree or anything. I drove out in the pasture, about a quarter mile that way. Got out there, flipped the high flow switch on. I'm still at probably 1600 RPM. I never turn it on for the first time at full RPM. Let it start spinning, and about 10 seconds in, I heard a pop and my high flow shut off. And when I took this cover off, it looked like a hand grenade went off inside because the entire hydraulic motor exploded. Probably something to do with either temperature differential in the fluids or a failed pressure relief valve. Loftness fixed that. That's a warranty deal. We got it back. It was leaking out of this case drain port. So I hooked it up and turned it on, and then it started spewing oil out of the case drain. Or sorry, not the case drain, the pressure relief valve. So took it back. They said, yeah, the pressure relief valve we just put in was bad. So they put another one in, got it back. I ran the machine for 18 hours. I'm not sure how many hours. It's less than 18 hours on the mulcher, and this pressure relief valve starts leaking again. So we took it back again. And once again, they said, okay, bad pressure relief valve. So at this point, we thought, you know what? The RT135 might just be too much machine for this mulcher. Let's try a 299 behind it, see if it's a little easier on it. I couldn't hardly be happier. I mean, the only thing is with the lower flow rate, I think the blade speed is down quite a bit. It doesn't do nearly as good a job at mulching a tree when you suck it in on top. But for whatever reason, it seems to regenerate way quicker. It was taking about 27 seconds to spool up to max speed with the RT135. About 23 to 27 seconds. With this, it only takes 16 seconds. Granted, it doesn't have to spool up as fast. You know, you have a slower top speed to get to, but it doesn't stop me like the Eco would. After I cut through a couple trees, it lets me keep moving the tracks. It lets me back up and get the heck out of the way, and I'm loving it right now. I just wish I could get the top speed of the blade speed a little bit higher so I could mulch some bigger or some taller stuff. But we'll give Loftness a call and see if they can help us retune this machine, or maybe we need to get a different one that's set up differently for the lower flow rate. That's just the quick update on where I'm at with machines and mulchers. So I want to show you everything that I think needs addressing on this to become the best disc mulcher that you can currently get. So as you can see, since we have this lipped edge all the way around both sides, it absolutely plugs up with debris. That's one thing I really don't like. Honestly, I wish they would just have a a cap on top. Like the Eco, there's no lips. All you do is tilt the bucket up or down and you can clean it off. This thing, you pretty much have to scoop it out by hand. So the push bar has several things going on with it. At one point, Loftness had 2 of these plates. So there's one on the outside, one on the inside. These bolts were in double shear. It was a lot stronger setup. I don't know why in the world they went to the single plate. On this bottom hole, they have a tube welded inside here as like a anti-crush sleeve so that you can't crush the tube. On this one, there's no tube inside, so if you over tighten this, it crushes the whole tube. I put this oversized washer on to help transmit the load through these sides of the tube that aren't going to crush. All they would have to do at Loftness is, I'm sure they have these tubes laser cut, they could oversize the hole on this side to give you room to slide your anti-crush tube in, or they could make it the same size as the OD of the tube and then just put 2 little keyholes to put some retainer welds on it. Either way, there's some really simple solutions that let them put that anti-crush sleeve in. Because what happened on this, these bolts worked themselves loose. I can't talk. And then this whole thing started moving. Once this was no longer clamped tight, then the tube wants to bend. So you can see on this side, it started bending right about here. Simple solution is, let's not overcomplicate it. Let's find the position we want it at, put some braces going to the back, weld it solid. The other problem is they had all these different holes to adjust. Well, the material thickness between the holes was not enough to keep this bolt from just shearing that material out. It happened on both sides. You can't see it because I had to weld a washer over it to give me something to clamp the bolt against. So how to fix it? Either weld a brace on, or maybe Loftness can go back to having 2 plates and put an anti-crush sleeve in for the top hole. On the top here, I understand why you have this. It makes fixturing for welding easy because you have a hole cut through this plate. You just slide this tube in. Really though, you want this entire top of the bar to be smooth, and I'll put some pictures up to show you what I'm talking about. But even this little amount is enough to stop a huge tree from wanting to slide off like you want it to. And you'll cut it, and it'll come over, and it'll hit this, and then it'll fall on the skid steer, or it falls over and it gets caught on the mulcher. So just taking a plasma cutter, cut off wheel, cutting torch, whatever you want. We'll come in and cut these off so they're nice and smooth. Now these 2 shoulders sticking out are very useful. This one on the left, I don't think it's necessary at all. It actually seems like it catches trees and keeps them from falling, because you want to cut on your left side. So you cut here, the spinning of the blade will carry the stump over here, so that if your tree's here and you push up against here and the bottom starts going this way, you can hit this, and that makes the top of the tree want to fall this way. But then when the tree hits this, it's either got to go back or forwards, or it just gets caught. So I think I'm going to cut this off. Definitely need this guy, and the same can be true for this. If you happen to get to a tree and he's right here, it can come over here and help it fall over. We need a guard for our hydraulic manifold block. So I've got a shield design that I'm going to put from here to here. It'll bolt on. It's not going to weld on. So we don't have to worry about creating any stresses or anything with welding. It'll shield this, because when you're pushing trees around, guess what? They like to jump up and come try to attack your hoses. Or even if you're going into a big tree that's got branches sticking really far out. They come in, they want to poke your hoses. The other thing that I'm going to incorporate into my shield is going to be basically a round tube to prevent my hoses from chafing. As you can see, that plate is getting worn down. It was actually cutting through the hoses, so that takes me to my next point. The hoses, it came with this canvas cover, which is great for keeping the hoses together so that a branch can't get wedged in between them and try to pry them apart. But you need this spring protection system to actually protect the hoses from getting punctured or chafed through. Now, I had to get oversized springs that would slide over the quick couplers. The proper way to do this is you actually put the spring on while you're crimping these ends on. So you cut your hose, you crimp an end on, then you slide the spring over, and it'll fit a lot tighter like this one, and then you crimp your last end on. So this spring, I actually coiled the spring around the hose, and that took like 45 minutes. So for the bigger ones, we decided we'll just go up a couple sizes so we can slide it over, and it still does the job pretty well. The hoses on the Loftness are also too short for the ASV RT135. Just keep that in mind. We got burned on that deal with the RT135. Your dealer should replace them if they're too short so that you can fully dump and raise your bucket without trying to rip your connectors off. The last thing is going to be on our push side. So on the feed side, this is all gusseted and supported, and you can push really hard with this corner. But this is actually designed to feed the tree in so you can mulch it by sucking it in on top of the blade. You can push around on this, and you'll have to in certain scenarios, but for general moving trees around, I don't recommend it because, number one, if your blade's spinning, you're likely to accidentally suck it in and jam the tree in, the mulcher. And number two, even with the blade not spinning, you can get a tree in there and then you can push on it so hard it'll get wedged in there. I always recommend, if possible, pushing with the left side. But unfortunately, while they beefed up the right side, they didn't beef this side up at all. So this plate, when it was new, this whole square came down at this angle, and this stuck out straight. I've bent this over just pushing on trees because there's absolutely no support. It's just a little piece of 3/8 steel that they expect to hold this whole thing out all by itself. So my first thought was, well, I could come in and just cut this off, cut it like a triangle. Then this corner here would not be supported, and eventually this would get pushed down. So I'll have to get a torch and heat this up, pull this back out, and I'm going to design a whole new weld-on system that goes over this. It's going to strengthen this so it can't bend again, and it's also going to give us some nice gripping points to grab the trunks of trees and keep them from slipping off when I'm trying to push on them. And just for an example of what I'm talking about here is this kind of wood splitter edge that you have on this eco mower. It kind of cuts into the base of a tree trunk when you're trying to push the tree lengthwise, and it keeps the tree from wanting to slide side to side. And while I'm over here, you can see this lipless design allows all the debris to easily be dumped off the mulcher to keep it clean, prevent that fire hazard, and it makes it a lot easier to see if you have any oil leaks. And here's the pretty much final product. I think this is just about how I'm going to leave this thing. So at the beginning you could see I already had this side braced, went ahead and also braced this side. And I did all this by recycling the first push bar that bent that Loftness warranted. So this tube up top turned into this brace here. So out of everything I did, the biggest difference was just removing these ribs off the top. Now it works beautifully. Trees can freely slide off either side. If Loftness was going to change anything, they should absolutely just remove these ribs. Next thing I did was I removed the tube that came out here. I cut that off because it's good for almost absolutely nothing. The only time I could ever use it is if a tree that I cut wouldn't fall down because all the foliage was hugging the branches of the other trees standing around it, and I would want to come in and knock the tree down to the left or knock it down to the right. That's the only time that I've ever found that I would use that tube. And then I actually took these tubes off the other bar, welded them together, and then welded them on here, and I angled it so that when you do cut a tree and it's falling over this way, now it just very so gently and gradually pushes the tree forward. So as the tree is falling this way, it's being pushed forward. So it doesn't want to necessarily just fall straight down. It'll actually fall forward a little bit. Then down here we have this brace slash push box that I laser cut this. So I'll throw some pictures up of the internals on this guy. It's pretty beefy. Wasn't able to get our original plate bent, like beat back into the original shape all the way. We had a lot of heat on it and a lot of force, and we couldn't quite get this all the way up so I could weld that solid, but I think I've got plenty of bracing and weld on this sucker. And then these teeth, when they were fresh off the laser cutter, you could cut yourself on these. So these do an excellent job of biting into a tree stump, and if you're trying to push it around on the ground, or if you cut part way through a tree and then push the tree over in the direction you want it to go, these keep the mulcher from slipping off the trunk, which this bites in pretty well too, but this will slide off. I have not had this slide off because these teeth bite in so well. And I actually kind of took the idea of the teeth from this. They're actually, on this grapple, they're actually pretty much these dimensions, just sharper. These are rounded off. I drew these in AutoCAD to a straight point, and I didn't leave any space in between them. It's triangle, triangle, triangle. So the only thing that I took off, I added, you might have seen it in one of my other videos, I had a shield that went across here to protect the manifold block. Because when you go up to a tree, it might have a branch sticking out right off the base of the trunk that wants to push in and damage our connections here. So that blocked my view of the blade where you're cutting to fell a tree and where our new push bar is. So I had to take that off. With that shield, I had incorporated a round piece of tubing that went along here to prevent this sharp 90-degree edge from cutting through the hoses. I'm hoping the springs will protect it now, but as you can see, this edge runs parallel with the slots in the spring. So there's a chance that this could still get in here and rub on this, but I think it's fairly unlikely. I'll keep an eye on it. I still think Loftness should put some type of tubing to get rid of the sharp 90-degree edge, because I mean the hoses wear like crazy along that. But I'll give you an inside view. I'm just tickled to death with how much better this thing operates now with these fairly simple modifications. It did take me the better part of a day to do all the cutting and grinding and welding, but it just massive difference in how much more control you have when you're cutting trees. So you can see, I can clearly see the little push box up front, and I can clearly see the area where the blade's going to go into the tree. Whereas when I had that shield across there, it was like that. So you were really just guessing what was going on. The only other suggestion or thought I had was taking from the Eco Mulcher, which had some good things going on with it. You could pretty easily use this plate to make a formed shield. So the plate would bolt here and follow parallel. It'd just bolt right on top of this plate and it'd come down. And then you'd have like a 90-degree bend and it'd come up right here. And it would just, you know, maybe run from the box over to the edge of this plate and maybe up to like here. Just to protect your connections on the manifold block in case you are pushing on a tree, because what happens is you'll be trying to push a tree lengthwise. So the tree is running like this. Let's say this is our tree that we're pushing. And you'll be pushing, and all of a sudden, you might be pushing a pile too. And one tree will just take a mind of its own, and all of a sudden, it'll hop up, and it'll come in, and it'll try to just go right into your hoses right there. So it'd be nice to have that shield to deflect that and shove it up. That's about it. Like I said, I love not having the ribs, getting rid of that bar on the side to stop the trees from hitting that and tipping over and falling that way. It is so predictable. If you own one of these, I would highly suggest you make these modifications, and you will be so much more productive and so much safer and easier on your equipment. So thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video.